Hi, this is Herman P. Hunter again, and we're back to discuss my response to the Death of Epic Fantasy video that came out some time back. The first installment of this video series dealt with demographics changes and the notion that the interest in epic fantasy is in decline. In this part, I'm going to deal more with the business side of things, specifically why publishing houses are not interested in long epic fantasy series anymore, and why fewer epic fantasy books are being published by debut authors. First, especially the epic fantasy series being published by debut authors, that's not something new. One of the most common pieces of advice given to first-time authors seeking to traditionally publish is to write a standalone story. And in the current economic climate, I'm not sure any publisher is going to take on an author who is seeking to publish an epic fantasy series. And if you listen to any wannabe fantasy author, the first thing they're trying to publish is an epic fantasy series. Few, if any, want to just publish a simple fantasy story. So I see the 2 points probably conflated with one another. However, in times like these, if publishers are going to offer advances to debut authors, it'll be for those genres that are hot, and right now that's romantasy. There are other reasons, but I'm not going to mention them. This is partially why my epic fantasy series got rejected. In this day and age, businesses are going to go with properties they know will sell. Everything else is going to be a vanity project. I personally think this is a monumentally dumb idea, and coupled with a few other monumentally dumb ideas, has led to declining readership. This has been acknowledged, by the way. Readership is declining. In fact, this is one of the reasons why Hollywood has been pushing an endless string of sequels and constantly rebooting properties, because these IPs have existing fan bases that will show up to buy their product. Well, when the producers, actors, and directors aren't actively crapping all over the fans when the fans complain. Everybody wants to make a quick buck. No one really wants to put in the time and invest in something. This wasn't the way it used to be, and I'll just leave it at that. The fact is, if an author's books are reporting a profit, that should be good enough. Unfortunately, I've worked in businesses that have taken a stance that just mere profit isn't good enough. It has to be above a certain level for that company to succeed. And that kind of thinking has led to lots of longer-term issues that in some cases brought down the company itself. Basically what I'm saying is these are bad management decisions. Now, as to more practical matters, the one thing being cited was publishers' desire to decrease word count, and I'll play a clip here.
And then Peter McLean, the author of the War for the Rose Throne series, wrote a long thread about how publishing houses are actively asking authors not to write longer books. Now this thread is a bit long, but I will read most of it, and thank you to Patrick Leo for bringing this one to my attention. Peter McLean wrote, "This industry is brutal. It is especially brutal at the moment when production costs are off the scale because of global economic events. I had my entire War for the Rose Throne quartet published by JFB at Hachette in the UK, and I was very fortunate there. Ace at Penguin in the US dropped it after the first 2 books. They both earned out in the States and are still making me, and therefore them, money, but that's not enough anymore. Making them money is no longer enough. Absorb the fact. You have to make them a lot of money or you're done. And I guess I didn't quite manage to do that. But here's the thing, I never really had a word count constraint before. I think Prince of Crowns published at around 145,000 words. A George R. Martin or Robert Jordan book is at least twice, if not 3 times that. My new contract, glad of it though I am, has a hard 100,000 word cap on it. That's how much of a constraint production costs are now. I think unless you're already a megastar, the days of big fat fantasy are done. Lean and mean seems to be the way forward, like the genre was back in the 60s and 70s. And the crazy thing here is that Mike Shackle and E.L. Lamb both commented stating that they had both been told by their publishing house to not write anything longer than 130,000 words. What? I mean, this is insane to me. I mean, yes, I do understand that profits are important. Of course they are, but how can you ask someone to write a fantasy and then simultaneously ask them to limit their word count 100,000 words?
Now, there are practical reasons for this. I know fantasy readers like their big chunky books and their huge epic fantasy series, but those big chunky books take up a lot of volume and have a lot of mass. That means they're big and heavy for those of us who attended public school. It also means they take up a lot of shelf space, which is limited and costs a fortune to ship. and it is shipping that can be the real killer. The distribution mechanism for traditional publishers isn't just to sell to bookstores. They'll also eat the returns from bookstores in the event that those books don't sell in a certain period of time. That means publishers will pay for shipping twice per book if the book doesn't sell. They pay it once to ship it to the bookstore, and then a second time if the bookstore has to ship it back, and they have to eat those losses. So shipping and storage, these are not minor issues. One way to cut down on these costs? Make the books smaller and lighter. In addition to the invasion of romantasy, we may be seeing a trend change in how people consume fantasy literature. Given that social media is conditioning people to have shorter attention spans, there may be a whole generation of new readers who are not going to sit through 1,000 pages of one book in a 10-book series. They'll look at that monster book, frown, and nope out. Then there's a contingent of people out there who have been burned by buying a huge book that they eventually hated. That's a lot of money for a major disappointment. Some people may not have $30 to spend on that big epic fantasy book. They may put off buying it for later. Yeah, I know all about Brandon Sanderson's phenomenal Kickstarter successes, and how some of those romantasy books that I utterly detest are selling these special copies. It's not indicative of the market overall. Your average reader isn't going to drop the amount of coin that Sanderson's fans will drop on one of his Kickstarters. And romantasy has its own sort of behavior that you're not going to see with the traditional epic fantasy fan. Hesitancy only gets amplified with an unknown or debut author. I know that my novella sells far better than my other book, which is twice the size. It's most likely for the reasons I cited above. So while I don't think the reasons being highlighted indicate the genre of epic fantasy is dying, I do think that writers need to adapt to the changing market conditions. I should point out that huge epic fantasy tomes really didn't come into vogue until sometime in the 1980s. Before then, most books were usually under 100,000 words. I went back and checked. It very well may be that we're seeing a shift back to smaller books. Nobody really knows. Anyways, that's all I have to say for now. I think I'll do a third video, and that should conclude my response. Until then, take care. And buy my book.